Welcome to the Figure Feedback Podcast. My name is Jeremy, and whenever I decide to do a video such as this, it's because I've got something on my mind, a lot of things rattling around up there, and I want to get it out and get some opinions about the topic from you. And I also try to structure these podcasty like videos in a way so that you don't have to sit here and stare at me the whole time. You can open up another tab, or you can just turn the screen off on your phone and you can just listen to it. And I'll try my best not to incorporate too many visual elements that would be required for you to actually look at the screen in order to understand what is going on. So hope that you sit back, relax, listen, and let's talk about something. So recently I reviewed the HeyGears UltraCraft Reflex RS. It is a resin 3D printer, and it is a really, really good resin 3D printer. But at the same time, I think that that printer opens up a discussion when it comes to closed ecosystems and open ecosystems when it comes to 3D printing, but more specifically, resin 3D printing from this particular manufacturer. So in case you are not familiar with HeyGears, here's just a quick rundown of what they do. So they've got a couple of resin 3D printers that regular folks like you and me can just go and buy. The first one is the UltraCraft Reflex, and then the newest one is the UltraCraft Reflex RS. And they sent me that printer to review along with other YouTubers, influencers, content creators, whatever you want to call us, so that we could make those videos and show them off and review them and just get the word out about them. But the interesting thing about HeyGears when it comes to this whole space is that they are a more professional oriented, industrial, commercial kind of a company as far as mindset goes. But because they sent the printer to folks like me, they are also trying to speak to our audiences, which is just normies, not really people who do 3D printing necessarily for business and making money and for production, but folks who do this type of thing really for a hobby. And they've brought over some of those sort of industrial aspects of their business to the consumer side, and it's caused just a little bit of a stir as it did before. So what the heck am I even talking about? Well, HeyGears has a closed ecosystem, meaning that there are some aspects of this printer that you just cannot access and you cannot change. One of them is the slicer. They have their own proprietary slicer. It's called Blueprint. And because of that, you can't use any other slicer. Now, in resin 3D printing, a couple of the slicers, most popular slicers that people tend to use are Chi2 Box and Lychee. And you can jump in between those two as much as you like. Maybe you like the features of one slicer more than the other. You can just go over and do stuff over there. Or maybe if for some reason you don't want to use Lychee, you want to see what Chi2 Box is all about, you can jump over to Chi2 Box, see what they're all about, try out their slicer, try out their supports, their different features, and slice files on that, take it over to your printer, and then you can print that way. So there's options there. But with HeyGears, there is no such option. You are only capable of using the Blueprint slicer, and that's something that people really just don't like. And another thing is, their slicer doesn't allow you to control certain aspects of your resin printer settings, such as your exposure time for your top layer, for your bottom layers, and for your normal layers. You can't control the lift distance, the lift speed, the transition layers, the light off delay, like all these settings that you will go through in resin 3D printing. You have zero access to them because they've designed their printers and their slicers to take away those seemingly mundane tasks of really trying to dial in the resin so that you can get the best result possible. They say, don't worry about that. We take care of all that for you. But what you can control, if you want, in the slicer, you can still put things on the build plate the way that you want it. You can rotate the way that you want it. You want to hollow things out, you can do that. You want to control your supports. You want to manually place your supports. You want to change the parameters of auto supports. You can do all that. And they also include this feature called one-click slice, where you click one button and it's going to do all the orientating, the positioning, the repairs, the supports, and the slicing all by itself. You send it over to the printer, you start the print, let the printer do its thing. Now, in my experience, this has been extremely successful. Not having to worry about controlling any of those settings and letting the printer do what the printer is going to do and let the slicer do what the slicer is going to do has proven to be really convenient to use. But it's closed. A lot of people don't like that. But is it necessarily a bad thing? Across the board bad? And I think that's where the discussion definitely needs to be had. With that being said, I want to take a moment here to say thank you to the sponsor of this video, Aura, which is also helping me to protect myself in the technology realm as well. So by now, I'm sure that you've heard about this massive data breach from National Public Data that exposed some 3 billion pieces of information on Americans. And part of that information included names, addresses, phone numbers, and then even social security numbers. And that is a huge deal because thieves can take all of that information and they can use that to open up fraudulent lines of credit. They can use it to steal identities and just completely wreak havoc on someone's lives. And don't think that that cannot happen to you. Don't think that the chances are not that good, because it happened to me. Okay, I woke up on a Sunday morning to an alert from Aura telling me that my social security number was leaked on the dark web as a direct result of that data breach. Now, thankfully, Aura was able to help me to mitigate that situation before any real damage could be done. They were able to help me to freeze my credit at the 3 major credit bureaus. And I also trust Aura to keep an eye on things for me so that if something suspicious does pop up in the future, they'll give me an alert so that I can take care of it when it happens. And if the worst thing does happen, I'm really happy to know that Aura does offer $1 million of insurance to cover the losses as the result of identity theft from data breaches and things like that. You can also take it one step further by having Aura alert you if any suspicious transactions, financial transactions, were to occur on your accounts. So listen, this type of stuff is happening all the time. So it's extremely important that you protect yourself online, okay? And I highly recommend that you use Aura to do so. So if you want, you can check out the link in the description, or you can go to aura.com/figurefeedback. You can sign up for a free 14-day trial. You can see everything that Aura has to offer and what they can do to protect you online. All right. Highly recommend that you do so because it's already helped me out tremendously since I've been using it. So thank you so much, Aura, for sponsoring this video and helping me out online. And with that, let's get back to the open source conversation. The other somewhat proprietary nature of what HeyGears does is with their resin. Now, let me just be completely clear. Do they have proprietary resin? Yes, they have proprietary resin. But before you hear the term proprietary resin and just go, nope, I'm out, can't do it. You hear proprietary resin, nope, I hate it. It's a horrible idea. Anybody that does it, I'll never buy from them, blah, 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 you know. And I understand proprietary resin just seems like, why? You know, it's like proprietary ink cartridges for printers. Like, are you serious? Like, what's wrong with you, evil companies? Let me do what I'm going to do. But that's not entirely accurate, because you can still use other third-party resins with the printer. You are not forbidden or prohibited or prevented from using third-party resins. HeyGears just recommends that you use their resin, one, because you keep coming back to them and you keep spending money, and of course that's what they want, but also because their resin is the only resin that they can actually vouch for. Like I said in the beginning, their philosophy is to create a resin printing experience that is predictable, reliable, convenient, and easy, which is a really big handful of selling points when it comes to something like 3D printing and resin 3D printing. But if they say that you can use whatever resin you want, and our printer is just so good, it's going to give you these great results nearly every time, that wouldn't really be something that they can, stand on with confidence, because they control their resin, their testing, their formulation. They can't do that with other people's resins. So even though you can put like Sunlu resin in there, if at any point any of these third-party manufacturers decides to change up the formulation of their resin, switch some measurements, put a little bit of this in there instead of a little bit of that or whatever, it could affect the print quality. It could affect the accuracy. It could affect the reliability of printing when used in HeyGears' machines. And when people decide to start using the lower cost resins, because HeyGears resin is more expensive than, typical resin out there that you typically find on Amazon, it can make the company look bad, because this is supposed to be a printer that just does things great pretty much all the time. But when I put resin in there, I can't get anything to be successful, or it's doing a lot of deformations, or my supports are not holding on as they should. And it's because you're not using the stuff that they've actually tested for and that they can control. So because they want that control so that they can continue to make claims that are backed up by their own research and testing, and they're not reliant on anyone else to justify the claims that they make for their system, for that reason, I can understand why they would want to keep their system to themselves and not vouch for anyone else. Now, there is an argument that can be had that says, well, why can't they just have a bottle that you can fill up with your preferred resin and stick that into their printer, and then give you the option to go into the slicer and change everything the way that you want it to be? And yeah, I understand that. But again, it takes away from the overall goal, I think, and the overall philosophy of what they're trying to do. They want everything to just be as simple as possible. They want to be able to say that they can confidently deliver a product just as is advertised. And they don't want to rely on anyone else's settings, because someone's going to screw up. Someone's not going to be able to adjust the parameters to their liking. And when that happens, they'll probably end up blaming the printer. And it may not even be the printer's fault. So they want to kind of just avoid all that. That's kind of how, I look at it like that. But also, when it comes to closed systems, I'm also reminded of back in the day, smartphones. When smartphones were really starting to take off, you had two ecosystems. You had Android and iOS. Still to this day, the two big dogs in the yard, really the only big dogs in the yard, really. But when Android phones first came out, I had the second Android phone ever released in the United States. It was called the MyTouch 3G, offered through T-Mobile. And from that point to some years in the future, the thing about Android is it was always open. It was open source. You can do way more customizations than you can do on an iPhone. If you don't like the UI, you can change that. You can change your background. You can change your icons. If you don't like the default camera app, you can change the camera app. If you didn't want to have the experience that the manufacturer put on the phone and you didn't want any bloatware, if you knew how to do it, you could root your phone and install stock, pure, clean, uncut, vanilla Android on your phone. And in some cases, it made the phone work better, because back then a big criticism of Android phones was, despite its open nature, they were unpredictable. They were laggy compared to the iPhone. iPhone and Apple, they have a walled garden, very similar to HeyGears. They're a little bit more open than they were back then, but they're still to this day not completely open. And the thing about iPhones is everyone had the same thing. Apple didn't allow you to change different things on the phone like you could with Android. And while that limited the versatility that you had with that phone, what you were getting in return was predictability, reliability, the confidence of knowing that your phone was going to behave in a very predictable way and it was going to do what you wanted it to do, and you didn't have to worry about it much of the time, most of the time. Android wasn't that way. One of the biggest criticisms of Android phones were that they were laggy, and it was true. But some phones were better than others. Some Android phones were just not very good. You have them for a little bit, you put some stuff on there, they just wouldn't respond as well. Other Android phones, they performed a little bit better. It was just a roll of the dice. And for a long time, manufacturers and Google itself was trying to achieve parity with Android. And that was the idea of Android phones, instead of having all these different variations of quality, would be really close to being the same as far as their reliability goes, as far as their predictability goes, as far as their quality goes. And part of that was trying to make sure that they were all running the same firmware. Because back then, whenever Google would release a new version of Android, you would have some phones, they were Nexus phones back then. Before the Pixels, there were Nexus phones. And those were the phones blessed by Google, and they would have the very first dibs on the latest version of Android. But if you had a Samsung phone or an HTC, remember them phone, or a Huawei phone, remember them too, LG made some really unique phones. It's a shame that they got out of the game. But if you had those phones, you may not have gotten the newest version of Android when it first came out, because they had to go through all these different certification processes with different manufacturers. They had to test to make sure that that version of Android was going to work properly on these phones. And then there were carriers that were getting in the way. It slowed the whole thing down drastically, and it made it so that Android phones were so fractured in their quality that if you wanted something that was truly stable, you just went with an iPhone instead. Even with Instagram, back in the day when Instagram first came out, it was an iPhone app, only an iPhone app. It wasn't an Android app available for Instagram because the iPhone had consistent camera quality. And Instagram wanted to have that same type of high quality photos across this whole platform. And if it just opened up the doors to Android phones with all of this varying picture quality and camera quality, it could possibly have dragged the app down. They were looking for like that higher tier kind of a look. And eventually, when they could not resist Android anymore, of course there was an Android app, but way back then, it was an iPhone only app. And that was all because the walled garden for Apple produced an overall more stable and reliable product, and people obviously loved it, and that's why it was so popular. And I will also argue that because of Apple's walled garden, it actually improved smartphone quality across the board, because Apple became the manufacturer to chase. The iPhone became the phone to beat. So that meant that everyone had to get their act together, and they had to make higher quality products so that they can get a piece of that market share that Apple was having. And right now in 2024, it's as good as it's ever been. Doesn't really matter which Android phone you might have in your pocket. Unless you are like really scraping the bottom of the barrel, you're going to have a decent experience, a good experience with the Android phone. These aren't laggy anymore. The cameras don't, just suck anymore or expect it to suck anymore. Things have gotten a lot better, to the point where most people aren't even thinking about parity anymore. Most people aren't even thinking about what the latest version of Android has. Everything has gotten more balanced, perfectly balanced, as most things should be. And I think that Apple is partially responsible for that. But having that closed ecosystem is not always a good thing, especially when you start to factor in legal situations. You look at Stratasys right now, and they're suing Bamboo Lab over patents that are so broad in general that I'm no lawyer, but I feel like they should have never even been granted in the first place. If you're not familiar with that, this is a lawsuit that's going on right now that, if worst case scenario, could lead to the entire consumer 3D printing market as far as filament-based printers go. It could turn the whole thing on its head. And it's because of one company wanting to keep everything all to themselves. An example of that would be if I were to patent, say, a power switch. And even though there's devices that have power switches already, I have the patent to it. So I got the patent to the power switch, and then I go over to like the biggest PC manufacturer in the world and I say, I'm going to sue you. You know why? Because you're using power switches and I patented the power switch. Okay. So if you want to use power switches, you're going to have to do either one or two things. You're either going to have to pay me for everything that you sell that has a power switch, or I'm going to sue you out of existence, because I'm the only one that can do it. I'm going to find everyone else that has power switches and I'm going to sue them too. And the main goal for me, of course, is to have everyone just constantly give me checks, because I am the patent holder of the power switch and no one else can use the power switch. That's the type of horrible patent abuse that could totally destroy an industry. And that is one of the main reasons why I think the 3D printing community loves open source so much, because they've seen what horrible things happen when there are closed ecosystems backed up by really overly broad legal patents. For a long time, consumer base, FDM printing, or FFF, depending on which one that you want to use, was being held back because of these patents, because of this closed-mindedness, because of this give it all to me first, gimme, no one else can have what I have. And I had to wait until those went away before we really started seeing the type of innovation and just mass adoption that we're seeing right now. And one company is threatening to send it all back. So, that is a reason why keeping things nice and open is so important. It's a lot of the times a defense mechanism against evil corporations that want to take everything away in the pursuit of making money. So I totally understand the importance of having things that's open. And there's also a danger when you have a closed ecosystem. When you go back to HeyGears for a second, let me tell you what happened. So remember when I said that their slicer is proprietary. You can't use any other slicer. So the day that the printer was officially revealed, which was the 19th, I was excited. I wanted to check out the live stream, see what they were going to say, check out the other videos that people made on it. And I opened up the Blueprint slicer on my computer and it had an update. I was really excited to see what new features were available. So I updated the slicer, it restarted. And when I went to just see what new features that might have been there, I didn't see the printer. I didn't see the RS there anymore. And I thought it disappeared. Okay, well, let me just see if I can rebind it to my account, because I had to make a HeyGears account in the beginning and I had to bind the printer to my account. I went to rebind it and it told me that I needed a special code that I can get off the printer. But the printer wouldn't give me the code because it was already connected to my account. So it was like, well, I already did that process. I don't need to give you the code again. But there's also another option to bind the printer to my account using the serial number of the printer. I got the serial number. I typed it into the slicer. It said, nope, failed. Use the other code. But there is no other code. What I'm saying is the printer was useless because the slicer had taken it away from my account. So that means that I could not slice for that printer, which means that the printer was inoperable. I couldn't do a workaround. I couldn't take it to another slicer just to get a file to put on a USB stick to put into the printer. You can't do that. The update to the slicer ruined my ability, took it away to use that printer. Now, I was fortunate enough to have access to HeyGears technical support on my phone and ask them what was going on with that. But before they got back to me, I was doing some clicking around and I saw that there is a beta version of the Blueprint Slicer that's connected to your original account, but you have to make separate login credentials. I did that. I downloaded the beta version of the slicer, and once I installed that, I was able to use the printer again. But if you're thinking, well, since the new version was messed up, why didn't you just revert back to the old version? I did. I had the installation file for the previous version of Blueprint that worked. So I uninstalled the new version. I reinstalled the old version, and the update prompt came up. And that's when I realized I didn't have a choice but to update. The options were either update or don't update and close the app. You couldn't click off of it. You couldn't say ignore this update. It forced me to update. And you know that in the world of 3D printing, doing the updates as soon as they come out, ooh, that might not be the best idea. You usually want to wait for some people to become the guinea pigs so that you can make sure that everything is okay. Especially if you're doing like bamboo printers, flash forge printers, new updates, new slicer updates. Let's just see how this works. And then if everyone signs off on it, then you update. But not so with Blueprint. They forced me to update and it broke the printer. It broke the ability to use the printer. But because of that beta software, I was able to get back in. And now the printer works again. But what if I was a business and I have a fleet of these printers, and all of a sudden I can't use them anymore? Now I have all this downtime. Time is money. I'm losing out on production. I'm losing out on potential money. If I have employees, they're there and I'm paying them, but they can't do anything, all because this update to the slicer has removed my access to a printer that I paid for. I would be extremely upset. And anyone else would be too. You don't have to be a business to be upset about that. And there's no workaround. There's no, well, let me just take this alternative route, and then once they fix things, I'll just go back to you doing things the way that I was before. No, there's only one path, and that path was blocked. And if you didn't know about the beta, then you would be stuck. Now, HeyGears did get back to me. And here's what they told me to do, which was, fortunately the exact same solution. But here's what they said. They said, Blueprint Studio version 1.1.0 beta 6 was released. This update fixes the bug that allowed the official version to use RS, which might impact users still using the official Blueprint Studio version for RS slicing. Please make sure to switch to the beta version or upgrade to the official 2.0 for their RS pre-processing tasks. I don't know what 2.0 refers to because I've already updated the slicer to as high as it can go and I can't access the RS. So even their solution was to use the beta. But what if this were to happen down the line because some update botched it? Your printer would be useless. And if they were a little bit more open, at least you could still use it. So people who are against these closed systems, they got a really good point when you look at it from that perspective. How something so simple can make your expensive purchase completely inoperable. Now, I don't want anyone to think that I am like anti-open source or anything like that, because I am totally not that. Okay, I think open source is absolutely incredible and it is amazing. I think that we need open source. We need the ability to see what we're doing, to be able to see what the software is doing, and then keep things open between the community for the sake of the hobby and technology, and then also for the sake of our own privacy. So I'm really just trying to look at both sides of this situation. When it comes to HeyGears, I know that the ecosystem for HeyGears is closed, but at the same time, they're not being evil about it, They're just saying we want our product to be held to this standard, a standard that only we can guarantee when we control all the factors that go into it. They're not trying to take something and reach outside of their box to negatively affect everyone else around them. So I think that when a company decides to keep things close to the chest, it's not always a bad thing, so long as they're not trying to screw over other people who are just trying to do their own thing. And it's just a business decision that they are choosing to do. It might work out for them in the long run. It might not work out for them in the long run, but at least I can understand why they're doing what they're doing. The question is just, is that something that you want to put up with? Some people just absolutely refuse to deal with any company or any manufacturer that doesn't give them the level of control that they feel that they should have, and that's fine. Other people don't care about whether something is open or closed. They just want the thing that they're trying to print the way that they want it to do, and as long as they can do that, then so what? I'm just trying to get the thing off the plate so I can hold it and paint it and like it and sell it or whatever. Don't care about how it actually happens, just as long as I get what I want. That's also a very fair and valid point of view. So just gotta ask yourself, which camp are you in? I don't think that there's a right or a wrong camp to be in this situation. Sometimes people just want stuff easy, and that's completely fine. Other people want control, which is also fine. And that's why we got options. You got other printers out there, other manufacturers that will let you do the things that you want to do. But in this case, HeyGears, not so much. At least not right now. We'll see if they ever decide to come around in the future and make things a little bit more flexible. But until then, this is what we have. All right, so those are my thoughts on this situation. I want to know what you think down in the comments, whether you care about this particular closed ecosystem in resin 3D printing or other types of 3D printing, or if you're just interested in the final result, and that's it. So thank you all so much for watching and or listening to this, and until next time, take care of yourselves. I'll speak to you soon.